Good afternoon and welcome to our every 2 weeks chat with the leader of the council. My name is Drew Mellor and I'm the leader of BCP Council. One of the things we're doing today is we're actually having a theme session on transforming travel, our transforming cities programme. So we've extended the time of this today so we can hopefully get a lot more questions in, and I'll shortly be introducing our panel. So we've got a panel both from the council and our public health partners on this. Before we get into that specific session, I just wanted to, as we tend to do when we start these sessions, is to sort of reflect and start on where we are in our COVID situation at the moment. So our numbers of transmission, we've got 604 per 100,000. That's high and it's growing and it's gone up. We've been hovering in and around the 500s for the last 6 weeks or so. So we are seeing a slight rise in transmission. It is still higher than it has been at certain points. The highest we've had it at the height of the pandemic is over 900 per 100,000. So we're not anywhere near those levels of transmission, but we're still very serious. So very much urging people to go and get vaccinations if you haven't already. We're now opened up to, or shortly we'll open up to anybody over 18 being able to have booster vaccination. So that's going to be a key part of our winter resilience, effectively, and how we're gonna get through this. In terms of what we've got in hospital admissions, with our rate at the moment is 101, which was at over 600 at its peak, but that was running really high. So it's great that the transmission and then hospitalizations are less than they were, but we are still seeing that number creep up. And so it's just a reminder to everyone, please be aware. Ventilation massively important if we're having to meet inside. Face coverings are important, and you notice some of the national changes in and around. We now have to wear face coverings in shops and on public transport, and we've also got changes to when you're flying back into the country now in terms of requiring a PCR test in the first 2 days. So very much still there, but if we get vaccinated and use some of the precautions, that'd be really helpful. So okay, on to today. So we're in this is about transforming travel, massive program of work that we've got going across Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole over the next few years. We've had a few of these theme sessions and they've been really popular and successful. So please, but by all means, suggest other theme sessions we can do. For this session, I'm just about to introduce our panel. Please put all of your questions in the chat bars. Hopefully you'll be joining us now on YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, as well as Facebook. So whatever way you're engaging, great to see you. And please put your questions in and we'll get to them. Firstly, can I just introduce our panel if we can? We've got, I mentioned public health, which are our partners on this TCF programme. So we've got Rachel Partridge, who's the Assistant Director of Public Health Dorset. We've got Councillor Mike Greene, who's our portfolio holder for sustainability and transport. And we've got Marc Griffin, who's our Transform TCF programme manager. So hopefully you've got a good range of people, and please ask any questions you like, and I'll effectively chair the event. We're going to run into a short video, a 1 minute video. But before I do that, let's give a bit of a understanding of what we mean by Transforming Cities Fund here. So we've got £102 million has been secured by BCP Council and Dorset Council, largely through central government's Transforming Cities Fund. We've also put some contribution into that ourselves. But we're really proud. We're just one of 12 regions in England to have a share of this Transforming Cities Fund. So it's the largest ever investment we've had in sustainable travel, and it is a really exciting opportunity to really improve our travel choices. So your travel, your choice is the idea. I think we know we're one of the most congested areas in the country, so this is fundamentally important to us. It absolutely is a programme that has to be done alongside working with our communities and understanding and listening to them, and hopefully today can be a good part of that. The funding is ring-fenced to invest purely in sustainable and public travel, so it can't be used for anything else. And just to give a scale of the ambition here, it's effectively 78 kilometres of new walking and cycling routes, and improvements across our region, across the whole network there. So we can talk a bit more about some of the detail of the project as we go through this. But what I'd really rather do is get into your questions if we can. So I'm going to play our video now, around about a minute, and then we're going to get into some of the questions. So please ask any question you like, and we'd be delighted to look at it for you. But if we could roll the video now, that'd be fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so welcome to our panel. Thanks ever so much for joining us. We've got 2 questions that have been submitted just before we started, so I'll go to those first. The first one is, how does active travel help reduce pollution? Mike, perhaps that's something you can lead off on.
Yeah, very happy to do so. Thank you very much, and thanks for the question on that one. The key thing, as Drew's just pointed out, about active travel is that we're about trying to give people the choice of how they get around. At the moment, or certainly pre the work that we're doing, there isn't the alternative for a safe, fast cycling route in particular. Buses are getting held up, and there are various barriers to walking as well. If we can offer those to people and give them that choice, then what we're hoping, and what we've seen elsewhere in the country and around the world, is that some people will make the choice not to travel by car, but to go under those active travel methods instead. What that then does is it frees up the roads and means that there is considerably less congestion. That less congestion means that the air quality improves, and that's what this is all about.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much, Mike. And then we've got the last question we were looking to ask before we go into the ones that have just been put, is why can't the money be used to fix potholes? So again, Mike, is that something that's appropriate for you to answer?
Absolutely. This is completely ring-fenced money. It's come in. We've got a £102 million programme. The vast majority of it has come in from national government, and it is absolutely ring-fenced. We can only use it for public sustainable transport and for capital requirements to be able to do that. We are not allowed to use it for road fixes. That comes out of different pots of money, etc., much of which is internal to the council, some of which is outside and comes in from national government. We're not allowed to use it for subsidising buses. We can't use it for anything else. This is what we have to use it for.
Okay, fantastic, great, thank you very much. Okay, so we're getting quite a number of questions coming in now. Should we start with Marc White? Why is a BH Active Travel an independent campaign group using BCP logos and has councillors sitting as members? Confirm with independent group, permission to act on behalf of BCP. Mike?
Yeah, I think this is going to be mostly me, probably, by the look of the questions that are coming through. BH Active Travel is an independent campaign group. However, it's come from the cycle forums that were set up by Bournemouth and Poole councils beforehand, and it's the new name for that, and it's expanded to be looking not just at cycling but also particularly at walking as well. They are not authorised to act on behalf of the BCP Council, but in exactly the same way as we use DOTS Disability Group as the sounding board as we're going through some of these potential schemes, we do exactly the same. We look at BH Active Travel as a partner that we'll look at, but they are indeed an independent campaign group and they have no authority to speak on behalf of the council. But we do want to listen to what they have to say in the same way as we want to listen to everyone else.
That's great, thank you. Marc, is there anything else you want to add there?
Yeah, thanks, Drew. So good afternoon, everyone. So on that point around the membership or the the stakeholders with this TCA program. We've got quite a robust what we call governance process, and we have a lot of partners, key stakeholders who join meetings with us to develop the program, and that includes disability groups, VH Active, our bus companies, Beryl Bikes. There's a number of different stakeholders that feed into the discussion around the designs and also to take the program forward. So lots of good communication, and I think they're all very happy with being on board with the program.
Great, yeah, absolutely. Okay, got a question probably for one or both of you from Hayley Cuff, talking about reliable and affordable selection of buses. Buses are more expensive here than in London. Mike, perhaps do you want to start off about that?
Yeah, absolutely. There are, out of the 6 transforming city corridors that we've got, 2 of them are around sustainable transport rather than cycling particularly. And part of the work that's done in those is to try to ensure that buses can get through quicker and easier than they can at the moment, involving bus gates and various other activities, and also improving the bus shelters with the information that's coming up. What we've heard from the bus companies is that they need to make sure that their journeys are as fast as possible as people can take in the car, and that's the way they're going to be able to get around it. We as the council do not run and do not own the bus companies. Those are provided by as private enterprise, and what we try to do is to ensure that they can operate as well as they possibly can for our residents, for our workers, and for our visitors. But what we can't do is to be putting council taxpayers' money into more than a few really essential services. So the whole idea of this is to try to make them more attractive. As they become more attractive, they become more people are getting on them, and as more people get on them, we've got a virtuous circle, because they then become more profitable, or at least less loss leading, if you like, for the bus companies. So it is that virtuous circle over the course of a few years that will push us forward. But we have to be absolutely clear: this money cannot be used to subsidise bus services, and that's what would be needed if we wanted to try to put extra ones on.
Thank you. And Marc, if there's anything point you want to come in on any of that, please do. Okay, and I think Marc, that also goes for a question later down the line, doesn't it? Really, we're talking about again from Hayley, maybe realise how few people ever choose to cycle and keep the disabled and other users unable to cycle in mind when making pavements and roads more narrow for our new cyclists. I think the point there very much is it's about your travel, your choice, isn't it? So if you want to, or need to, stay in the car, that's absolutely fine. But if the people who would like to choose to travel on bus or walking or cycling, then great, you're freeing up some of that network for the people who really need it, which are exactly the people that Hayley's talking about there. I'll just go back up one actually, and again, this is a question on Facebook from Ross Hodder. So I support the programme broadly, but would like to know why there is so much shared use path in the schemes. And I appreciate there might be some crossover in some of these questions, but I'm trying to give as many of a chance as possible. Shared use is not liked by cyclists or pedestrians and is strongly advised against in LTN 120 guidelines. So for probably both of you again to come in on that.
Yeah, and the LTM 120 guideline is something that's been put through by the government. It's a little bit technical, but it's all part of the gear change approach, which is saying that we want to try to get more people using active travel, particularly cycling and walking, rather than using their cars. And Ross is absolutely right that if you can possibly avoid using shared paths and have properly segregated cycleways like we have on Wallace Down Road, as it's been so much in the news over the last week or so, then that is the ideal way to do it. But at the same time, what we're trying to do and what the government's trying to do is to reduce down congestion. At the moment, we are already, depending on which survey you use, between the 3rd and the 6th most congested city region in the country, actually the 112th most congested in the whole world. And that is set to get worse and worse, because inevitably the BCP area is going to become more populous. And if we don't do something about it, those extra vehicles that come in are going to mean that we effectively move towards gridlock. So the idea is to try to get people off that. In some roads, Wallisdown Road being one example, we've got the space to be able to do that without reducing down the number of lanes of car traffic. Because as soon as you start to reduce down the number of lanes of car traffic, that is when you will increase congestion. Where you don't do that, and all you have to do is just to narrow down those carriageways a little bit and still allow the segregated cycle routes, that's fantastic. That's the win-win that we're really looking for. But many of the roads in BCP, we haven't got that availability. So what we then do is say, well, what is the next best thing? And it's to try to ensure that there is enough space for cycling and pedestrians. And if that means that they're shared paths, well, that's certainly better than trying to push the cyclists into the road, which gives them no incentive. That safe element is so important in trying to affect that modal shift, in trying to give people the choice to cycle if they choose to do so.
Great. Thank you. Marc, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, thanks, Drew. So the question around the carriageways, and I think you made a good point there, Mike, around the widths of carriageways. We are obviously restricted by widths on the carriageways. We're using the best use of the space we have. In the video you saw at the beginning, we are limited on space in some locations, and also there are some obstructions on the network. So what I mean by network is the roads, the pavements, etc. So you might have trees, you might have utilities that are buried in the ground that we can't possibly move because it's too expensive to move. So what we're doing is looking at the reallocation of space where possible. The LTM 120 reference it's technical, but that's what we have to follow. That's part of the grant conditions from the Department for Transport. We have to follow that guideline, and there's a number of stages of level of infrastructure that goes in, and one of those stages is to have shared use. There may be segregation, there may be some stepped, but then the next point is shared use. So certainly following that, we're very mindful that there are areas where they're maybe not to the standard that people expect, but it's still within those guidelines that have been advised on the question by Ross.
Thanks, Marc. Thanks for that. Okay, what I'll do now, I'm noticing a number of questions coming in around the vaccination programme, so which is different from TCF. But while we have Rachel online for us, perhaps that'd be quite a useful in line with the COVID introduction I gave earlier on, Rachel. Anything you would like to say in and around some of the vaccination or booster programmes?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. And it's very timely. I know we're here to talk about TCF, but obviously in another part of my role, I'm spending a lot of time working on COVID response, as is a whole range of people. So I just wanted to reassure everyone here listening that there is a huge amount of work going on to actually deliver this enormous rollout of the booster vaccinations. And actually it's happening as we speak, and I've come from a previous meeting where it's about deploying all available resources. And this really is a Dorset-wide BCP system approach to this, where we're providing all sorts of different locations to get this booster vaccination programme rolled out. Yes, that it is incredibly popular because of all the reasons, all the messaging that we're putting out and the government's pushing out about the importance of getting vaccinated. And the importance of getting boosters means there's a huge number of us trying to do so. So it's the message of keep persevering, keep trying, absolutely acknowledging that it's proven very, very popular, which is a good thing, but we are working as a system to get as many sites up and running and get that access to all of those of us that need that. Because as Councillor Mellor said at the start of this, it's one of the really key aims and pushes that we can do to protect ourselves and our families as we go into winter. So yes, lots of work, absolutely recognise these challenges, but bear with us and keep persevering, please. Yeah,
absolutely. Thanks for the work you're doing on it, Rachel. So we're in regular contact as a council, saying actually how we can support this, and we'll do whatever we can do. So I think it's quite a changing environment at the moment, and see an awful lot of work going on. So keep trying and watch your space as well. Okay, thank you. Let's go back to the Transforming Cities Fund work. Got a question, a specific one from Darren Smith around Derby's Road Junction, which is one of the schemes we've got for one of the ETROs, I believe. So there's a petition there as well. Perhaps this is probably one for you, Mike, in terms of the local petition and also the staggered lights. So perhaps you could just have a answer, Darren, please.
Yeah, I'll actually leave Marc to answer on the staggered lights if that's possible. But I think the main point about the Derby's Road junction is it is on one of these corridors. And the whole point in the TCF and the Transforming Cities Fund, the Transforming Travel Programme, is to make sure that we're not just looking at little disjointed bits of cycle lane, particularly when they're available, but to make sure if somebody wants to go on one of the big routes, whether it's from Bournemouth to Jumpers Common, whether it's from Poole to Merley, as it is in this case, whether it's Bournemouth to Ferndown, there's a possibility to jump onto that route, to jump off it when you need to, but to know that you're going to be able to get all the way through. And I think it's really important here to say we're not looking at what some people will be talking about the Lycra Brigade. There are people who will cycle whenever they want, and they'll do it at the moment. They're happy to go through. They're confident enough in doing so. But if we are going to reduce down the congestion that we want by encouraging enough people to say, for the short journeys I'm going on, some of them sort of between 2 kilometres and 5 kilometres, as many of those are, particularly in the rush hour, then we need to encourage new people to do it. It's not enough just to say we're going to make things safer for those that already do. And if we're going to do that, that means having that continuous route through so that they know pretty much from getting on their bike until getting off their bike that they're going to be able to do so safely. It is not safe and it is not fast and it is not direct if we do not do something about Derby's Corner. And that, for that reason, that one is one that I'm absolutely insistent we have to be able to allow people to travel the way through. We're talking about some of the 1,600 signatures, and that's not just about Derby's Road. It's about a number of the road closures that were put in by the previous administration of BCP last summer. And we do recognise that there were some flaws in that. But that really isn't the discussion for today about how they were put in with so little notice and without any opportunity for people to have a say on them. But some of them were put in to allow this free flow of cycles that will encourage people. Some of them were more about trying to make little tiny areas more comfortable for those who live there. From our point of view, from mine within this administration, I'm much more about balance. And if it's really for a case of a few people to have an advantage, but causing disadvantage for many, I wouldn't back it. Something like Derby's Corner, which actually can achieve that change, that encouragement to cycle that is going to mean so much for everyone, whether they choose to cycle, they choose to walk, they choose to go by bus, or they choose to go by car, is the sort of scheme that I do want to see go through. And that's why I'll be insisting that the Derby's Lane one continues as it is.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And perhaps we could have a comment from Marc around the staggered lights on that question.
Yeah, thanks, Drew. So in terms of that, I don't know the exact details of that one because it's not linked with the TCF program per se. But in terms of the lights, we are looking at a lot of the junctions. I think this is a point made by Darren about the type of technology we're using. I'll take that question away in terms of staggered lights at that particular location, but on other locations we are looking at technology. There's some really good advances now about improving the traffic flow at junctions through this new technology being more intelligent. I think there's a comment as well around having sort of priority for cyclists and pedestrians. Yes, that is being looked at too. So on a more general term, Drew, we are looking at technology of junctions and signals on the whole TCF program, but I'll take that specific question around staggering at the lights for Darren to come back later on.
Great, and I'll just say as well, so what we try and do is we try and answer some of the questions that we either don't get to or on here as well. So we will try and come back to everybody as much as we possibly can. Rachel, that question is probably a good point, and to bring in to talk about some of the and we've got some other questions sort of alluding to it around the benefit of active travel from a public health perspective. So perhaps you could just talk to us a little bit about the benefits of active travel, why we're trying to do this from a public health perspective.
Yes, of course. And actually, it's been a really great opportunity for us. I'm really delighted to be involved in the bid. And the fact that BCP is one of only 12 areas to get this huge investment in infrastructure is a really exciting opportunity for us. Looking at some of the resident surveys that we did of residents across Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, we know that many people do walk and do cycle for travel, so not just for leisure, But we have got a large number of our population, I think it was about 33% of our population already walk for parts of travel, and around 8% for cycling. And that was back in 2019, which was the most recent survey data that I had that I could find. But we know that there are lots of people, there's a huge proportion of our population that aren't getting enough physical activity. So there's a huge push about us, all of us, moving a little bit more. So when we're talking about creating an infrastructure that helps all of us be able to walk or choose to cycle and get out of cars for those very short journeys, and not necessarily all the time. This is about a really easy opportunity for us all to have the available infrastructure to allow us to choose to walk or cycle. And I know there were some comments about the great British weather. And yes, sometimes it's not the day to take your children on a bike ride or a walk. Completely, absolutely recognise that. But we know that around 40% of us in BCP aren't getting enough exercise or physical activity. And that's not about necessarily going to the gym. It's about building in bits of activity more into your daily lives. And the beauty of active travel, and that's walking or that's cycling or that is walking to the bus stop, building in that little bit more activity each day is a cheap and easy way of being able to do that. And that's why I felt passionately, and public health also really keen to be involved, because we know it's a nudge. And I understand and I get the sense that there is some disruption as we change the infrastructure and acknowledging that. But we're thinking about this as a longer term benefit for us as residents of BCP to be able to make those choices, to be a bit more active, to be able to walk the children to school, to be able to cycle to work, or be able to make those choices that builds in a bit more physical activity, or just for us to move a bit more in our daily lives and it be incidental. There's also some really good studies in the fact that people's well-being, so mental well-being, is improved as well about walking to work or walking to the shops, not least because some of the routes are through some really nice, beautiful green spaces that we have in our area. And also the incidental benefit of seeing other people. You're not just stuck in your car on your own, stuck in traffic. About that, again, that's probably on a nicer day. It's not when you're out in the pouring rain shuffling to get somewhere as quickly as possible. But it's really, this feels like a truly transformational opportunity. It is a big programme of work. There's huge amounts of work going on in the background in terms of my technical colleagues, and I'm ducking all these hard questions about route sizes and lane widths and stuff. But actually, to see the purpose of this is to create an environment for us in BCP to be able to move a bit more and move a bit more safely, and everybody doing a little bit more. It's not just focusing on those people, and I do not count myself as one of them, that can cycle long distances and turn up for a meeting. This is about being able to do little bits, and for us all, to a really inclusive approach to getting more people out and about and being active. So you can tell it's definitely one of those really great pieces of work where there's so many positives, and we know about increased incidence of non-communicable diseases, so those diseases of lifestyle where we're not moving enough and we're perhaps carrying a little bit too much weight. And this is all part of that package of where we as BCP are trying to create an environment to help us all live slightly healthier lives, and this is one component of that. Sorry, yeah. I've been quiet and then I wasn't.
yeah, great. Thanks, Rachel. And what amazed me was looking at it was the relatively small amount of exercise people need to make to have a huge difference. So, between 30 and 150 minutes of exercise a week, you've got a huge, in that first 30 minutes of exercise, it makes a huge difference to public health and people's health from not doing it. Okay, we've got a huge amount of questions, so I'm trying to summarise some of them and get through a few. We've got quite a lot about disabled people, disability effectively. I wonder if we could sort of frame a couple of those questions. Does anybody have anybody who'd like to lead off on that? Mike?
Yeah, sure. And when we're looking at the programme, it's very, very much with disabled and less able people in mind. Obviously, the improvements we're making to pedestrian use is very useful for many of those. But also the cycle lanes that we're putting in, the segregated ones, are going to be available to all those in mobility scooters who are able to go up to 4 miles per hour. The crossings are going to be useful for them as well. And obviously everything that we go through an equalities impact assessment, and that goes right the way down to the smallest numbers as well. So we have experts coming into us within this. There have also been some questions over the time about why different groups aren't involved in this, and same way as we had right at the beginning about BH active travel. And what we do is, as a council, obviously everybody can feed into all of the consultations that we have, but we have a partner that looks particularly for ensuring that things are right for disabled people, including wheelchair users, and that's DOTS Disability. So we use those in the same way as we do with BH Active Travel to be listening in advance of consultations to make sure that we've got that right. We can't go out and say that we're going to take every group that's around to do so, but we do believe that DOTS really does speak on behalf of disabled people within the BCP region, and so that's why they are involved in the discussions as we put all of this together.
Great, thank you. Marc, anything you want to add on that? Or I've got we've got some questions in terms of bus infrastructure as well. So either of those, Marc?
Yeah, I can bring them both together. Actually, that's helpful. So the point that Marc was making about the disability groups and the designs, we'd all engage with them. We've been engaging with them. Got as I think Rachel mentioned, quite a detailed technical team who works with me to look at all the designs we're proposing on these routes. So that will include access for disability, cycling, walking. But the important thing here is that each of these corridors, they're called corridors because we are trying to improve the whole length of the corridor by improving infrastructure. And that's one of the key things the Department for Transport and Government want to see, is that we are linking up journeys, so connection to maybe a bus stop or to a business or to a school. It's all around joining the dots up to get a full corridor of improvements. And that's been welcomed by I think through our consultation and through engagement with businesses and schools. The point about the bus infrastructure is we are looking at options to improve the shelters, the raised curbs to reduce dwell times, but also where possible introduce maybe a section of bus lane or improve the actual flow of traffic or the bus traffic through junctions where we can prioritise bus signals at junctions. So there's a lot of work in the background going on to improve the whole corridor approach to this programme. On the second point about the I suppose the offline network, there's a comment on the chat around the footways. We are doing a lot of work in some quite sensitive areas around rural areas, certainly the north of the BCP into Dorset area, and that will make a significant difference to access to businesses and schools in those areas as well. So a lot of good work going on, but clearly a lot of technical work needed with relevant environmental bodies and stakeholders to ensure we're doing the right things in the right place.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay, so got a question from Sue Smith. So the George roundabout in Poole and the road in front of a bus station are both big barriers to cycling or walking into Poole Centre. Are there any plans to improve those areas? Mike, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think the answer has to be yes on that. They are both really, really difficult areas. Obviously, they're only a few yards apart from each other, but they are difficult for cyclists. They're difficult for pedestrians, and actually, the George roundabout isn't that easy for cars either. So it is absolutely a priority. It is on the Poole to Merley route, and I should Poole to Ferndown route, and I think it is an important element of it. How we go about improving that in a way that's not going to increase congestion is going to be quite difficult. It is a challenge, but it's something that officers are working on right now as part of this programme. So yes, the George roundabout is absolutely a priority. When it comes to the bit around the bus station, I agree with you. So it's an absolute nightmare. And in fact, if you want to try to navigate your way around, particularly on a bike, you've got no chance there. It's awful. That does not fit in with the Transforming Cities Fund corridor. However, it's something that I know Drew, Phil Broadhead, the deputy leader of the council, and myself are very much involved in looking at how we could do something about that whole area, which really will make it easier for people to get around there. It's just not good enough as it is at the moment. I would love to have seen it as part of the Transforming Cities Fund money coming in. It's not that, so we're going to have to try and find another way of funding that.
Thank you very much. Okay, I've got a question from Robert Stone, slightly different tact, talking about consultation effectively and how people will be consulted, etc. So who would like to kick off on that? Mike again?
Probably better Marc on that one, actually,
Marc,
as to
okay.
how we put that together, because he'll be able to talk to you about the consultation process as it's been and how COVID's affected it.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Marc and Drew. So yes, we have, clearly everyone knows, we've been quite challenged by the recent pandemic, and we have had to rethink about how we consult with the public and stakeholders. So when we were first awarded the funding, which is great news back in 2019 now, we did one phase of engagement to let people know around what the TCF was about, and that was all as possible on an online platform with some advertising going out as well as best we could due to the pandemic and the restrictions of meeting up in person. We then completed 2 phases of consultation between February and March this year, following that there were 4 of our cycle routes that we're proposing for TCF, and we received some really good feedback on that through the online platform and through other media. And then the second phase was 2 what we call sustainable corridors that took place in May and June, where we also had a lot of comments back. So some were quite negative, but we take those on board. The design team's looking at those to see where we can resolve those. Following those 2 phases of consultation, we're now engaging much more closely with the key locations. So we had a couple of engagement events which I think have gone down very well with the local people. We've had an opportunity to speak to them face to face for the first time, which has been, I think Rachel was saying, the mental health point of view, certainly my staff have been very welcome to get out and about and meet people for the first time in a few years. And that will continue now through the programme as more and more schemes are developed further. And I think there's a couple of comments on the chat around specific locations. And of course, we'll be engaging with those specific locations in the next year or so. So lots going on and a lot still more to do. And hopefully that answers the question around consultation.
Yeah, great. And hopefully this is a sign that we're trying to sort of raise a debate about the whole issue as well. Okay, probably another one for you, Marc. I've got a sort of a technical question from Lucy Allen. Can you confirm if any of the new cycle traffic lights will trip on recognition of a cycle and turn to green? Apparently someone used to do this or didn't. So there's a general question, but maybe also specific about some of the technological changes we can make to help Marc.
Yeah, thank you. That's good question, Lucy. And we are, as I said earlier, about the signals. The technology is changing rapidly within the industry, certainly in transport. So there is one section that's taken place at Kings Park where we have used the recognition or the detection of cyclists going across the road. Obviously, it all needs to be safety audited before we can implement those changes. But that will be included there and other locations as well where we deem it necessary. So yeah, technology is a big thing. I mean, one of the other points, I don't mind me expanding on this, we have to do a lot of work with the DFT, Department of Transport, on the what value is the investment by government bringing to this programme. So we're doing a lot of work at the moment on our monitoring and evaluation plan, which means we would monitor the usage on the network pre-investment and then post-investment. Also, we'll look at the figures, and there's a lot of strong evidence now through our business case development where we're seeing those improvements do encourage more modal shift to cycling, walking, using public transport, and people still using their cars. But it's really important that we use the new technology to capture that data and report to, or later on the call today, but also to our stakeholders and clearly to government as well.
Thanks, Marc. Great. Okay, so I've got a quick question from Darren Smith. Was this a proactive choice to take this government money for this scheme? Could you have chosen not to take it? Yeah, I think it's fair to say it is was a proactive choice. It was from before BCP's time, predominantly in terms of Mike will know more about this than me, but We are one of the most congested parts of the country, and as Mike explained, the world. So, proactively, we've pitched for and bidded for an opportunity to bring in unbelievable amounts of money that we wouldn't be able to bring forward ourselves. Over £100 million to try and change this. So to Darren, just a really quick answer, but yes, that was a proactive choice. Mike, I'm going to bring you in next to ask a question about Mike Hammer regarding Tatnam Road. So, but by all means, if there's anything you want to add about the proactiveness, please do. But the question we're trying to bring up now is Mike Hammer, ref Tatnam Road. Mike.
Yeah, thank you very much. And you're absolutely right, Drew, about the proactive choice that we made to be able to bid for this. And I'm really, really pleased that we managed. Only 12 city regions in the whole country got this money. We've done so because we are one of the most congested. And let's just go back to that video that we saw right at the beginning. You've got two choices if we're going to avoid gridlock. Either we're going to build more roads, and the only way that we're going to be able to do that is by compulsorily purchasing hundreds, if not thousands of houses, knocking them through and building those roads, because there is no extra space to be able to do so. The second way, and the way that we can do it, is to try to find ways of offering these safe, fast alternatives for other people who are prepared to give up some of their car journeys in order to and to cycle or to walk or to take the bus instead. If we can do that, then we will bring down the congestion, or stop it getting it to the stage that it brings us gridlock, and the huge economic cost of doing so. So I think what we've got to try to remember is that being proactive transport is not being anti-car. It is actually pro-car, because what it's doing is it's allowing enough traffic to come off the road so that it starts to flow more easily again. And that is to everyone's benefit. It really is a win-win. If I can now just come on to the Tatnam Road one, there are certainly discussions that have been going on. There are a number of people who believe that Tatnam Road closure should stay as it is. There are a number that believe that Tatnam Road closure should be removed. And what I do, I think in contrast to the previous administration, is I have no dogma behind me as I'm doing this. And what I would try to do with these road closures that were imposed last year is to say, when we're looking at them, I start from the position that I would like to support the ward councillors, who should know better than the rest of us do about their individual areas. So that's where I start from. And then what I do is I try to look at all the benefits and all the disbenefits, weigh them up and say, well, on balance, is there anything that means that I've got to move away from what the ward councillors have recommended and what the ward councillors support? And in the case of Tatnam Road, I've looked at it and I can see that there are some benefits. I believe that they are limited to a very small area. I've also seen that there are some disbenefits in that it's pushed a little bit more traffic onto surrounding roads, particularly Holes Bay Road. And there is some thought that there may be some difficulties caused to businesses there, although I'm not convinced on that. But when I put all of that together, what I've done is I've said there's not enough to sway me from the point of view that I want to support the ward councillors. There are opportunities for people to come in, and indeed there's going to be an additional one for that on Monday, for people to come in and say, no, Mike Greene, you've got that wrong on that, and this is the reason. It's not a referendum. I'd like to support the ward councillors, but I'm very much taking an on-balance approach, starting from that position to decide whether I need to go against it or not. And in the case of Tatnam Road, there weren't enough benefits or disbenefits, in my own opinion, to say I want to go against what the ward councillors have recommended.
Great, thanks, Mike. And just on Tatnam Road, as Mike said, we've got a call in at the Overview and Scrutiny Committee on that one, and ultimately that will then report back to Cabinet. So where obviously I'm a member of Cabinet, so I won't be commenting on Tatnam Road specifically now, but really we'll listen to that debate as and when it comes through on Monday. Thank you to all the residents who have put so much energy into feeding back their views, because ultimately Mike's absolutely right. We can take a view, but then we want to listen as well, don't we? And we want to hear where it's working, where it isn't working. Okay, got a question to is it Mary Benham? We're going to come to. What plans are there to improve pavements for those walking and public transport for non-cyclists? Marc, perhaps that's one for you.
Yes, thanks. And a great question, Mary. Thanks for the question. So yes, we certainly are looking at improvements, not just for cycling, but walking as well. And I think this goes wider than TCF, but in terms of specifics to TCF, we're looking at routes that, as I said earlier, link to schools, to businesses, to those connections for transport. And that's part of the design process. So there'll be a lot of improvements to footways, and maybe an action for me to take after this session today is to just identify that further for those that are on this call today and the wider public, where those improvements to public footways are taken. The other important thing here is there's lots of other sort of bits going on in the background with this program. It's not just about the hard infrastructure. What I mean by that is we're not just improving the widths of the actual cross-section of roads, but also bringing in new wayfinding with information at key locations. We're putting in signage for maybe visitors or those that aren't so familiar to the area to maybe enjoy a walk through the areas. But also we're linking to schools and businesses, and a really important one for me is the link to schools, because we are providing facilities to encourage more active travel to school, but also improving safer routes for those schools, and there are a lot of them in the area. And part of this program is to ensure that those children are safe or safer getting to school with this investment. So certainly footways as well as pavements, you should say there, Mary, as well as cycle lanes are a key part of this program.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. So we've got a question from Jamie Burr around the Beryl Bike scheme. So I think it's showing a little bit of it's not hugely well managed. My understanding, it's been quite a big success and one of the more successful schemes in the country, Mike. So you'll know more about that than me. Perhaps you could come in on that.
Well, I can't get quite the up-to-date numbers, but yeah, Beryl Bike have been enormously successful. And if anyone's been around the country or even around the world and tried some of the other schemes that are available, they'll have seen the benefits of them. But the Beryl one is, I have to say, having done 8-10 of these around the place, that for me Beryl is the top one. And one of the reasons for that is that they've been very much in contact with Bournemouth Council, and then after that with BCP Council. Approximately, well, when people finish their Beryl ride, whether it's on a bike or on a scooter, they got the opportunity to answer a survey, and one of that main questions is, what would you have used how would you have got there if you hadn't used a Beryl bike? And an enormous number, I mean, even on the scooters, which except an awful lot of people do for fun, almost a third of people are using those journeys as an alternative to driving. And I think we're coming up now to something like 1 million kilometres. Again, somebody maybe have some more information that I have, that have been used by Beryl bikes. That has taken hundreds of thousands of kilometres, miles or whatever, off the road, of cars off the road. This is an enormous opportunity for us as we go forward, to allow people, whether they can store a bike, whether they can't store a bike, whether they use it a lot or whether they don't use it a lot, to be able to jump on a bike, go where they want to. And I very much hope that scheme is going to be expanded as we go forward, because it is a real benefit to active travel, and it is a massive benefit and will be more in reducing congestion, which will allow us all to be able to get around more easily.
Yeah, absolutely. I know a lot of people are really, really keen on the Beryl scheme. So thank you very much for that. Yeah, just going to do a really quick answer, well, more of on Jeff Beck's question. It talks of a government survey in 2020 showed over 60% of disabled people relied on their cars, or as a driver or passenger. Absolutely, Jeff. And I think this is such an important point to make. This is not about asking people who are unable or who don't want to get on a bike onto a bike or to walking. This is about providing opportunities for people who can and do want to do that. And if we can get just a few percentage of the people currently in cars who don't want to be in cars off of the road, that absolutely unlocks, and the modelling suggests it, absolutely unlocks the network for everybody else, particularly those and that's what we're all about, really, saying, your travel, your choice. We need to make sure the roads are not gridlocked, because some people need to use them, and it's the people who don't want to be using them, or don't have to use them, or feel like they would really like to get a little bit of extra health benefit in terms of walking or cycling. As little as 30 minutes a week makes a huge difference. That enables people to go into latter life with less reliance on cars as well, because as people are healthier, it gives better quality of life. So we're trying to do exactly what you're talking about, Jeff. Make sure that people who need to use cars can use cars, but provide the choices for people who would like to do something differently. So Jeff, thank you very much. Important question. Okay, I'm going now to is it a question from Nicola Lazenby, but a little bit about the climate effectively. So Marc, perhaps you'd like to answer Nicola's question, if we can bring that up for you.
Thanks, Drew. Yeah, thanks, Nicola, for that question. And climate change is important, and one of our Transforming Cities Fund objectives, again set by the Department of Transport and Government, is around managing the climate change and looking at the carbon reduction through this programme. So certainly we'll be looking at that as part of our outputs of the investment, is to see how we have reduced carbon impact of a programme and going forward. So that's certainly being taken into place, and it's not siloed, it's part of this overall programme as well. And an important part of that is I'm looking up with BCP and Dorset to the wider climate emergency that's been declared, and that's been set out in our business case to the Department for Transport, and I'm working very closely with colleagues in both BCP and Dorset to ensure that is considered throughout the programme and beyond as well.
Brilliant. Thanks, Marc. Okay, a question from Rachel Emma. Can you explain the purpose of consultation when ward councillors override the wishes of residents anyway? I'll just talk briefly on this. I think Mike's been really clear about saying that he will absolutely, and that's at 127 from Rachel. He absolutely will take into account the consultations. But if there is a strong ward councillor view, that's important. We're not completely reliant on that, and I think we'll see going forward, if there, as Mike has explained, if there is real compelling reasons one way or the other, we can make a decision that way. And also, if when something's gone in and it isn't working, or people don't think it's working, we really want to listen and hear. So Rachel, just to say, please do engage with the consultation. It absolutely makes a difference, and every single consultation response is read and taken seriously. So thank you. Okay, let's perhaps we could talk a little bit. We've got a question from Susan Claire Witten about Evening Hill. So saying Evening Hill cycle lane hasn't been used that well. What's when are we going to take it out effectively? My understanding, Mike, is that's just been made a bit more permanent. Perhaps you could talk through where its status is and what some of the benefits, and also I think we're just putting through a real programme of improvements in the area as well. So perhaps you could just talk a bit about Evening Hill, please.
Absolutely, and I think Susan has been in email correspondence direct with me on this at all. I'll be honest, I'm sorry, Susan, but we come across this from different points of view. I believe, and I've seen it with my own eyes, and I believe many other people have, the Evening Hill cycle lane is very, very well used indeed. That's particularly true in summer, but you know what? That's when we have more of our tourists coming in. That's when our roads are busier as well. So the more that we can take off during the summer is even more effective than those that we can in the winter. There are hundreds and hundreds of people using that Evening Hill cycle lane every day. And the reason why it is so important is because that as cyclists, they want to be able to do it safely, and particularly people who want to get into or want to give it a go need to know that they can do so safely. And when you go up a sharp hill, particularly if you are if you're not that confident, you start to wobble a little bit. That's why when people did it, they were either avoiding it completely, and as that is the main route through on that side of that side of town, that was a real problem because it meant that people drove, or they were using the pavement. And we know what the problems are with cyclists having to use the pavement. So when that came in, it has made it more and more popular for people to be able to cycle up. And despite the fact that both sides in all of these debates seem to think that they are the silent majority and the other side is the vocal minority, On that one, people are pretty clear. They want it. Now, what we have done, though, is we've tried to make sure that in keeping that there, we want it to benefit everybody and not just the cyclists. And so there is going to be a series of improvements that are carried out now that that lane has been confirmed, that it's going to be permanent, which is going to involve a crossing of the road, which is going to help everybody, where there are going to be disabled bays introduced into, I think it's Allington Road, the side road there, where there have been no disabled bays around in the past at all, and potentially down at the bottom of Evening Hill as well. So what we should be doing is bringing in enhancements which are going to make it better for cyclists, make it better for pedestrians, make it better for other people visiting, and particularly for disabled people who are visiting, who previously there were no disabled bays there at all.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mike. And yeah, it's been a really interesting one, isn't it? Okay, just one point around some of these questions are specifically around Dorset County Council. State Pill is one. So what we're going to do, we'll take those offline. So I have skipped through a few that are more purely Dorset Council, but we will take them offline and get back to you. Mark's nodding. Thank you, Mark. Got a question out, and apologies again how far behind we are. It's a huge amount of questions coming in today. So thank you for that. 131 from John Twitchin. Many of the improvements, well, I won't go through the whole question, really positive about, transforming cities as a general thing. But I'm then asking a more specific question about the Barrack Road scheme. So perhaps, Mike, you can spend a bit of time just talking about Barrack Road in general. But John, thank you for your question.
Yeah, Barrack Road is certainly one of the more controversial elements of it, because what we, as I explained earlier, the whole idea is to be able to allow people to get from one end of a route to the other end of the route, or any part of it. And Barrack Road is absolutely key in providing that safe, fast alternative for people who wish to cycle to be able to get to Christchurch. It's part of the Merley to Christchurch route. So we have to do something about it. We've actually had two opposing and equally opposing petitions in it, as it happens. One is about the absolute need to do it, as you've identified, Mr. Twitchin, and the other is about whether there is going to be a damage to the businesses by removing the parking outside that. What we need to do is we need to put all of this together and to try to come out with something which we think is going to be, on balance, the best solution. I have to say, the evidence that I've seen around is that, far from it being a problem for businesses where people have been moved from parking outside, what it's meant is that there's been a greater dwell time, pedestrians, cyclists, and if possible, you look to make some physical improvements as well. And actually what's happened, particularly if there is parking very nearby, is that those shops and shopping areas have benefited. In fact, I'd ask anybody just to think in their mind about any place around the world, this country particularly, but anywhere around the world, where you've looked at the shops and, God, that's buzzing, isn't it? What a great shopping area. I bet you there's no narrow pavements with cars parked right next to it. They're either pedestrianised areas, or they're very wide pavements, and the cars aren't stopping or idling right outside. So I think it's our natural reaction, and certainly those of us who've been involved in retail, to say, oh gosh, if somebody can't park right outside my shop, that's going to damage me. But actually, when you go through and look at it and really try to think about those buzzing areas that you've seen all over the place, it doesn't sort of add up. So what we need to do is we need to take that into account, which we will. We need to take the safety part into account, and we need to take into account all of the other factors. We'll put a balance together, and hopefully we'll be able to come out with a suitable plan which will aid everybody in the area.
Great, thanks. We're really running out of time now, so I'm just going to do two quick questions. Jeanette Heselden, 136. How about doing something for the majority instead of a minority? Jeanette, this absolutely couldn't be more about the majority. This is not to do with cyclists. This is not to do with supporting cyclists. This is to do with supporting everybody. If we can get, a few percentage of people out of their cars, that makes a massive difference on our network to people who drive and use cars all along. So it's 100% of people using cars. that's going, that this will benefit. It's everybody who isn't using a car at the moment, who doesn't want to use it, wants to actually walk or cycle. This will benefit. It's absolutely about doing what's best for the majority. If we do nothing, we're in all sorts of situation difficulty for the future in terms of where our congestion is. I was going to do one more question, but we don't have time. What I'd just like to do before we close is to give each of our three panelists just a chance for a look at a brief sum up. Before I go to that, we will absolutely get through all of your questions on here. Thank you so much for them. But if I could come to Rachel first. Rachel, anything you would like to say as we're closing here?
Really good to hear the discussion, really lively debate. This is about encouraging and helping our population and ourselves to move a bit more, and that's fundamentally what it's about. There's lots of discussion, and even if it's encouraging people to walk a little bit more or cycle or walk to bus stop, just that getting out and reducing those small short journeys, and this is a huge national amount of money and the opportunity to learn, and we're learning from other cities that are also going through the same process. So we are very much in that position of being able to learn what works well and also share our experiences locally. So I think it's very much about an ongoing process and dialogue, and this is a really helpful way of hearing back. So thank you.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you, Rachel. Thanks for your time today. Really, really appreciated. Marc, perhaps I'll come to you next. Anything you would like to sum up on?
Thank you. Yeah, and just to say thanks for the opportunity to join the panel. I think it's been a really good discussion, and some really good points and very valid points on the comments. Certainly around picked up quite a few about disability groups, and we do have a focus group, accessibility focus group, which I'll be feeding back to, because I'm quite concerned that there may be things the messaging isn't getting out, or you don't think the messaging is getting out. So thank you for those comments; they'll be picked up. And just generally, this is a significant program. We are working in partnership between BCP and Dorset. And there's a lot more opportunities for all of you on the session today to join in engagement sessions and to feedback any information that you have or any thoughts you have through our Transform and Travel information email box. So appreciate the time today, and thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, and perhaps we'll put up the Transform and Travel box if we can, Marc. So I'm sure one of our colleagues will put that up now as we're closing out. Mike, thanks ever so much for your time. So you've done a lot of the answering of the questions. Please, anything else you'd like to say as we close?
No, I'm also really grateful for people coming on. There have seen some familiar names, but there's an awful lot of non-familiar ones as well. And it's great to be able to have that dialogue, because actually everything that we hear from people gives us the opportunity to learn a bit more. Sometimes we can say, yes, I agree with that. Sometimes we can say, no, I don't agree with that. But being able to put it all together gives us that complete picture. And I think I'd just like to emphasize one thing, which has been the subject of some of the questions and comments that we haven't really had time to get into. But a number of them say, well, you're not going to get me out of my car, or you're not going to be able to persuade everybody to cycle. There are some people that can't cycle. There are some people that can't walk, etc. You are absolutely right to be saying that. And that is not, we are not aiming to get 100% of people to out of their cars. What we want to do is to get enough people out of the cars at the key times on the key routes, so that we don't all grind to a halt, and that congestion is brought down to an extent that the network can operate, and those who either cannot use an alternative car or don't want to use an alternative car are able to do so, and to be able to get round without the enormous delays that they have got at the moment and are going to get worse in the future. This is not, I'll say it again, about getting everybody out of their cars. It is, as you started with, Drew, about it's your travel and your choice. We want to provide that choice.
Yeah, absolutely, and thanks ever so much. We have an ambition. This is going to be a world-class, world-class city region. What does that mean? Health, happiness, prosperity, across the whole of Dorset, and that's what we're trying to do here. This very much is for everyone. It's not for a group of people, it's for everyone, and however we move around or want to move around. So thank you ever so much for your time. Thank you for the literally hundreds of questions that have come in. We really like these theme sessions in terms, it seems to be a great way of getting some dialoguing, bringing some other people other than just me to answer the questions. So easy afternoon for me. But so more themes. So any ideas on themed questions, please put them in. I'll just leave my email address up, drew.mellor@bcpcouncil.gov.uk, as well in a minute. And so anything, please do send to me. And look forward to being here in 2 weeks' time. And thank you everybody for your time today. Cheers.